Good morning, everyone. Full disclosure before we get started, the original working title of this presentation was Service and Scotch. But since it is at 10 a.m., we have to have standards and draw the line somewhere. So apologies for that. We also ask that you don't close your eyes for the next 5 to 20 minutes as we work our way through this. So again, I'm Michael Harms, the Vice President of Operations for TDn2K. I'm joined here by the always charming Ms. Kathleen Kaler. And we are going to talk a little bit about service. And what we're going to talk about is where we find ourselves today, adrift in the sea of sameness, okay? So some of you may have heard the old Japanese proverb, the nail that stands up gets hammered down. Maybe you felt like that nail a time or two. And while that little proverb does have its applications in the business world, that's not exactly how it works. In fact, it's somewhat the opposite. The company that rises up, that does something different, they're copied, they're mimicked, and their advantage is arbitraged away. I think Lon said it best yesterday when he was accepting the award for BJ's. I copy the best, right? Of course you do. That's what you want to do. You want to be the best. And we're going to talk a bit about that here in a second. So one advantage of, or I should say one way we find ourselves battling against this commoditized marketplace where there is a battle for market share is standing out. How do you stand out? How do you separate yourself adrift in the sea of sameness? And one of the things we've seen is what's happened with the iPhone, right? You look at 10 years ago when the iPhone came out, what a revolutionary device that was, how it looked different, how its functionality was completely different. And today, every phone looks the same. They all do the exact same thing, and people are competing on price, right? Competitors are trying to undercut Apple's price, and they are losing market share as a result. That's where we find ourselves today in the restaurant space. Everybody's the same. Your stores look the same, your menus are the same, and a lot of you are trying to compete on price, and that is a race to the bottom. So how do you stand out, right? How do you separate yourself from the pack? Well, some companies are doing it. There is a divergence in performance. So let's talk a bit about performance. 2018, as we noted yesterday, was a good day for the industry. We saw sales in positive territory for the first time in quite some time. Traffic still negative for the industry, but improving. That rising tide was lifting all boats, but it was lifting some boats faster and more than others. So let's look at that top quartile, those top 25% of brands, and see how they're performing relative to the rest of the competition. So when it comes to sales, best-in-class performance, those top quartile brands, positive 3.2% sales for 2018. The bottom quartile, negative 4%, 7-point spread. Traffic, same story. Top quartile, positive, almost 1%. The rest of the consortium, that bottom quartile, all negative, negative 6 for that bottom quartile. Again, a 7-point spread. So the difference between being the best and being everybody else is not only wide, it's widening. Again, as that rising tide rises, the best-in-class performers are pulling away, and this has been true for the last few years. The gap is widening slightly quarter after quarter, year after year. These people are getting more market share and more traffic. And the question is, why? How?
So one of the ways that they're doing that is driving intent to return. So when we look at intent to return in our white box data, and by the way, we never ask someone, do you plan to return to this restaurant? We're looking for them, they're authentically sharing, go back here, I don't recommend this place, I come here every Tuesday, or my favorite, the all caps, don't go here. And we see this in the data, we see that they're planning to come back. And how much are they planning to come back? 2 times as much, right? So the intent to return scores for those best-in-class brands that Michael just talked about, they are 2 times as high as the rest of the consortium. And Michael likes to say it's not just about getting the first date, it's about getting the second date, or the third or the fourth, right? And that's what's really driving performance and driving success for winners, for best-in-class brands. So what is it? What is that key differentiator that really makes guests want to return? What does the data tell us? Well, it's service. So we see that the best-in-class brands, those who are really winning in the marketplace, driving intent to return, driving traffic, driving sales, service is absolutely where they stand out. It's the one sustainable key differentiator. When we look at food and beverage, for instance, we find that, of course, it's important, but it's table stakes. So the best of the best and the rest can all have great food, can all have great beverage, But if you don't have exceptional service, you're not sustaining that advantage. Value is another funny one to think about. Michael talked a lot about how people are competing on price. We saw some unique things with value last year in the data, where there were even quarters where best-in-class brands, they actually had lower value scores than their peers. And the bottom quartile, they had the best value scores because they were discounting, and customers liked that, but it wasn't necessarily driving traffic. So what is it that really matters? We know it's service. Our team's going to dig in a little bit more and help you to understand now what is it that makes up that great service experience, and what does the data show in terms of best-in-class performance.
So yeah, returning to performance for just a moment. So Kathleen just mentioned that, again, it's that intent to return that's so important. So let's talk a little bit about what drives that, and that's where we really want to go with this presentation. So we just talked about that spread between best-in-class performers and everybody else. What drives service? Well, at the end of the day, it's people, really. So let's drop some HR metrics, some people values onto this chart here, and what we see is time and time again, best-in-class performers have significantly lower turnover at both the management and hourly level. Funny how that works all the time when we look at the data. We find this not only within our consortium, but also within individual companies. Better people scores, better sales and traffic numbers. So at the end of the day, what is the key here? What's the secret sauce to winning the market share battle? It's exceptional people delivering exceptional service that results in an experience you want to have again and again. So when we look at the data, we see several attributes that really stand out in regards to service. This is what's driving performance. And we've selected 5 out of the 43 subclassifications we track in White Box Social Intelligence, and we want to focus on those and walk you through some of the differences we see in the data and some examples of what companies are doing right and what they are doing wrong.
Yeah, so those brands with the lowest turnover, the best sales and traffic, one of the dimensions of service where they really win is accuracy. So what is that? It's your servers delivering on your brand promise every single shift. It's remembering the side dish. It's remembering the food allergy. It's cooking the meat properly. It's guests sharing online that they got, and I quote, exactly what I ordered. We see that time and time again in those best-in-class brands. And that really creates a difference. So you can see the best-in-class brands, their net sentiment scores on accuracy, plus 17 points. 15 points below them is the rest. So they're absolutely outperforming on this. The higher the score, the better, and they're delivering that accuracy. So what does that really look like? Well, here's an example. So this is from a best-in-class brand. They say, had really great service here tonight. The food came out quick, accurate, and super tasty. Can be a little bit pricier than other eating options, but it was worth it. You see that value piece there too, right? So what do we notice here? They're talking about service, and they're saying they had a great service experience, but all a part of that was the food coming out quickly and accurately and tasting good. So actually, when they have better service, the food tastes better too. The service was that linchpin that created the great experience for the guest. We see the flip side in the rest of the consortium. So I love this one because it's really a double whammy. The first thing that goes wrong is they get the wrong order and something's missing. But then the real straw that breaks the camel's back, it's not the wrong order, it's not the something missing, it's that there's no action and no empathy on the behalf of the staff, right? So they say they always use the same excuse. It won't happen again. What a waste of time. They're bored. They don't care. So when your team members are struggling with those basics of delivering accurate orders, you see it come back and really impact the impression of the whole brand. And you can see in this case, they always use the same excuse. This person has tried again and again with this brand. This isn't the first time it's happened. Ultimately, it comes back and it impacts intent to return. So it's not just accuracy. Michael, let's dive into dimension number 2.
Appearance. So another one of the attributes where we see an outsized performance difference in regards to net sentiment is at appearance with 17-point spread there. So what do we mean by appearance? We're not talking about remodels or the way the building looks. We're not talking about the attractiveness of the server or the bartender either. What we're really talking about here is professionalism. And a lot of the complaints we're seeing in regards to service when it comes to professionalism is, my server seemed more concerned talking to their friends or colleagues than serving me. They had a bad attitude. They seemed to be arguing with staff. They weren't making eye contact, things like that. They just weren't taking their job very seriously. And I'm sure we've all, experienced a restaurant that was busy and the server just reeked of apathy, right? They seemed disinterested. They didn't have any enthusiasm for their job. They didn't really seem to care. And again, if our goal is really to drive returns to the restaurant and focus on that intent to return score, this is not a recipe for return. If you feel like you don't matter, that is not a recipe for return. You're not getting that second date, okay? As Taylor Swift would say, we are never, ever, ever getting back together. Like ever, okay? So what does it look like when we do it correctly on the service score? This is maybe my favorite review I've ever seen in Whitebox, actually. The meals are perfectly prepared and beautifully presented. What stands out, the superb service, courteous, professional, warm, and responsive. They made us feel welcome. Can you think of a better encapsulation of service than that? That is what you want. You want them to feel special and welcome. Make me feel like I matter, okay? Make me feel like I am important to your business. And please, 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 don't forget that I'm here.
Yeah, absolutely. So attentiveness, you can imagine the number one complaint we see is people saying, they ignored me or they forgot about me. And that's not happening in the best-in-class brands at the same rate as it's happening in the rest of the system. So you can see those best-in-class brands, their attentiveness scores are off the charts high. And really the challenge around attentiveness is, are you properly staffed to be attentive? It's no surprise at this conference, we've talked about it for 2 days now, about staffing challenges. Yesterday in our FinSight Summit, Margot Manning, the COO at Dave & Buster's, was talking about simply the challenge of being staffed properly during peak shifts, and that she was looking at some reporting with some of her GMs and saying, are you trying to make a labor play here? And they said, no, Margot, we literally cannot find the people. And Matt Hood commented on kind of similar things that they see at On the Border and in their restaurants. And when you think about that from an attentiveness perspective and know how important this is, simply being staffed to give your servers the opportunity to be attentive is a challenge. But for the brands that are winning and staffing and then able to be attentive, they see positive results. They see the guests coming back. They see those better financials. So what does this really look like? Here's a great example. Michael said, make me feel special, don't make me feel ignored. And you absolutely see this. The server is described as friendly and attentive, making each one of us feel special. So when you are staffed in that way where the servers can be attentive, it's not just about being attentive in general. It's about being attentive to every single guest, the particular guest that you're serving right now, so that they feel special. And that really comes through in the guest feedback. The flip side to this, of course, is if you're not being attentive, we oftentimes see people talking about being ignored. We see them having to ask for things multiple times, waiting a long time for multiple things. And this is a perfect example of that. So in this particular brand, the person says they didn't check on our table. Several people forgot to bring out the same thing that we asked for. We waited 20 minutes after we'd already finished our meals just for our waitress to remember that we were still there. And then the thing that really kills me at the end of this one, she didn't ask if we wanted dessert, which of course we did. Don't think we're going to be going back there, right? So when you think about this, there was one loss on the attentiveness front, that the guests felt ignored, they're not coming back. There was also the loss of, you could have increased the check on this one last visit that they had at your store, they still wanted dessert. So attentiveness, it's not only a question of training, but also of staffing, and absolutely has a big impact.
So speaking of staffing and training, attribute number 4 is knowledge. So this one's somewhat self-explanatory. Just having your server know how to handle situations, be able to answer questions, and really know what's going on. We know difficult situations are going to arise anytime you're dealing with the public. And in a fast-paced environment where people are hungry, that's a recipe for a lot of difficult situations. So let's look at one of the comments here from the negative perspective. So the waitress, again, the words we see here, inexperienced, could not answer questions, acted like she did not know what to do, and they had to ask her to go find help, okay? The one thing we see here in a lot of these comments is unresolved frustration. Okay, something bad happens and it doesn't get solved, while the person is there, and they take it out on the internet. As you may know, people say a lot of mean things on the internet. One of the things we do see, however, is a lot of empathy for servers. They realize this job is hard. Maybe they're new, maybe they're still under training, maybe the restaurant's understaffed, maybe there was a rush. But when something else goes wrong on top of it, that's when they tend to really lash out. When the service was, the server was unknowledgeable, plus they were unattentive, they were on their phone, they didn't seem to care, that's when this really goes off the rails. So let's talk again about what happens when things go right. So here we see someone who's never visited a restaurant before. They gave it a try. Tyler helped them with the menu. He had a warm smile. He was really patient. So we see the word patient. On the negative, on the flip side, we see clueless, uninformed, unhelpful. Here we see patient, helpful, answered questions, always smiling, right? Now, there was no unresolved frustration here. But what Tyler did here was he made them feel welcome. He made them feel like they weren't burdening the server, right? And I would bet that Tyler got the second date, right? This person probably came back to that restaurant, if not once, again and again. And again, that's what we're looking for, is people to return to the restaurants. So we talked just a bit about unresolved frustration. Talk about attribute number 5, Kathleen.
Yeah, so it seems like when one domino falls, the rest kind of go with it. And what's left at the end of that is the manager. So when we see mentions of managers and guest feedback that we're tracking, sometimes you'll see that fabulous manager that just gets a glowing review. But the majority of the time, it's something about resolution of an issue in the restaurant. So either X, Y, and Z went wrong and the manager took care of it, or X, Y, and Z went wrong and the manager did not help me, and now I'm going to fight the power, and I'm going to go on Yelp, and I'm going to leave this review, and I'm going to tell you what happened. And that really seems to be the trend. It's all about that manager resolution. So again, you can see a big spread here between the best and the rest. And so we're going to look at some reviews that were actually posted by guests live in a restaurant. So they're posting these reviews while still sitting in their seat or sitting in their booth at these restaurants. So here it is. It took 20 minutes to get my appetizer out, and my husband's came 15 minutes after mine. I've been here for an hour now, and the waitress still hasn't taken my entree order. So finally we've decided it's enough. We want to leave. She got really upset and said she would get the manager for us. So the question is, what happens next, right? Does the manager come over and resolve the issue or not? Well, you can see in this particular instance, they're still waiting on the manager for 20 minutes, right? So this is why they've decided to go online, because they tried. They're in the restaurant. They're literally waiting for the resolution, and it's just not happening. Let's look at another example. So the service at this restaurant was probably the worst ever. I love that it took 15 minutes to get a beer in a pretty empty restaurant. That means I'll spend less money not asking for anything else. Why would I? I also love that no one checked back on my horrible entree after dropping it off. Great, less calories for me. If you are from out of town and want to have a great experience with great food, here's my favorite part, all caps. Save yourself and don't eat here. So this kind of looks like the first one, right? Lots of dominoes have fallen in a not so great direction. So are you expecting the manager to come over and save the day? Well, what we see here is an update. So they actually updated their review. Update, manager Eric came to the rescue and made this wrong right. Great management makes up for a lot. So at least try this spot if you're here. I love the switch, right? So they've gone from an all caps, don't eat here, to a, hey, try this spot if you happen to be swinging through town. And all of that just through the manager resolving the issue in the restaurant. So when you think about this and the power of the manager to resolve that situation, it's absolutely incredible. We're going to hear from some GMs today on our GM panel. And certainly I know you think about your GMs each and every day. And when we look at the data, their power on the guest experience is just huge. So when it comes down to it, and you think about all of these attributes and you think about what really matters, service in general, of course, here are a couple of the dimensions where you see the biggest gaps between the best and the rest. When those dominoes fall on accuracy and appearance and attentiveness and knowledge, when your manager resolves things in the restaurant, it just builds an incredible experience for your guest.
That's exactly it. At the end of the day, the sum of all this is experience. What we are after is a superior experience. Why do most of you pay the Apple tax and have an iPhone, right? It's because it's a better experience. And the data tells us the same thing about restaurants. Better service results in a better experience, right? And that's driven by your people. So I know that that's easier said than done. I'm sure every company has customer service departments or outreach, and they want to have a great guest experience. And that's kind of morphed into corporate jargon over time. But some companies are taking that seriously, and those are the ones separating themselves from the pack. So how do you get out of that sea of sameness? It's not through a new appetizer. It's not through a new drink special. It's making the guest feel welcome, right? It's making them feel special. It's how you make them feel. And what's the difference? What does the data tell us the difference is? Again, 7% comp sales and traffic. Only 22% of companies that we track had positive traffic. Okay, those are the ones growing. Those are the ones pulling people back in, and those are the ones we're going to be giving awards here at lunch today. They're the best-in-class performers. So at the end of the day, what's the solution? Again, winning the war for market share is done by exceptional people, providing exceptional service, and wanting to create an experience you want to have again and again.